Morning.
Hello.
You survived last night? You survived last night, Porter?
Yeah. Adventures in Zoom and YouTube and everything else.
Yeah, I never got on. Hi, Susan. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Great.
You're all bright and colorful behind you with all those colors.
Yeah, well, it's a background. I have some real cool ones. I've been sharing some real fun ones that I found. Let me give you my most fun one if I can find it.
Okay.
Yeah, see if I can.
I like the City Hall one. It's very mesmerizing.
Yeah, isn't that neat? Kurt found that, and I guess it's actual ink and water filmed in slow motion.
That's awesome.
So this one is the Great South Bay on Long Island when they had their tropical storm recently. So that's a ferry going across. I mean, I've never seen the Sound look like that. So I thought that was really a cool shot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That ferry's probably going over to Fire Island from Bayshore.
If it makes it.
Well, hopefully it did. Tim, long time no see.
How are you?
I am great. How are you, sir?
We've been crazy busy.
Yeah.
Trying to keep people afloat.
Yeah. Yes. That's.
I know Derek said he might call in.
I think he's on. Derek, you there? If you are, you're muted.
There's Steven.
Right. Mr. Horton here.
Hello, Michael. How you doing?
How are you? Derek's on the call, Porter.
Thank you.
You're looking good, my friend.
Always do.
Retirement fits you well, huh?
Oh, Michael, absolutely.
Oh, and Mary's in good too. Okay.
Can you get that podium here, please? And put it in speaker if you don't mind. Thank you.
Good.
Yes.
All right, well, we have everybody here. Before we go live on YouTube, I'll just quickly give you, since we haven't met, goodness, it's been since December, so nice to see all of you, and I hope you're all faring as well as can be expected. Basically, for those who have not participated in a public meeting in this format, what we need to do is every time we speak, do our best to remember to say our name. That's for the benefit of anybody that might be listening in. And also, excuse me, it's always best to mute yourself when you're not speaking, just so we don't have background noises conflicting. The other thing is, I'm going to read a roll call, so again, people can see what's going on. And we can talk a little bit more. Stephen is the still standing chair of the board. So Steve and I may work back and forth a little bit, but for the purpose of this meeting, since we haven't met in so long and we need to get caught up on a lot of stuff, I'll try to manage things as best I can with Stephen's assistant on that, and anybody else too. So just to give you a preview on that sense. But so we can begin. We're on, Kurt?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, welcome everybody. Appreciate everybody being here. Oh, and I'm also supposed to read a statement. So before we get started, I just want to point out to everybody that we are on Zoom. My name is Porter Arneill. And I am the Director of Communications and Creative Resources and the Board Liaison for the TGT Advisory or Grant Advisory Board. So welcome as we sort of regroup in a very unusual year and set of circumstances. I'm just going to say for everybody's benefit, we are broadcasting on Zoom, as you well know. We're also on the Zoom, the city's YouTube channel, and broadcasting on channel 25 as well. So those are all happening, and we are being recorded. The other thing is to do your best to mute when you're not speaking so we don't have conflicting noise. And I may mute or unmute people as I need to as we go through the meeting. Excuse me. So what I'd like to do, just since we're getting started, is just call roll at this point so we know who's here. So, Mary Doveton.
I'm here.
Great. Tim Metz.
I'm here.
Great. Derek Felch.
I am here.
Great. Heather Shull.
Hi, I'm here.
Heather is here. Sue Shea.
Here.
Stephen Horton.
I'm here.
Heidi Champagne.
I am also here.
Great, and Porter Arneill is here as well, so thank you for that. I appreciate it. Per the agenda, the first item is public comment, and I think Michael wanted to say a few things, but I'm also wondering, Michael, would you want to hold that until we get into some of the updating and stuff before you make any comment? Would that?
That would be fine, Porter.
Okay.
Michael Davidson speaking, sorry.
Thank you. I think that'll work better. So yeah, mostly what I want to do is get everybody caught up, and I can share my screen here. I emailed you all the document that tells where we are with current grants from this year. Hang on, let me get there. So you have this document, and this is part of the agenda that was sent out. As you can see, half of the awardees have already canceled this year. Several are on hold. It was very honestly quite a guessing game as this started happening in March, and a lot of events were scheduled in early spring, and everybody was trying to figure out what they could or couldn't do. So I've been working with everybody. What's important to understand is that not everybody received their grant immediately. And so a lot of the contracts I have on hand, but we didn't execute them just because everything was so up in the air. So basically what you're seeing is current as to who received funding. Several events did happen before the pandemic. And then who's on hold at this point who could possibly reschedule, although obviously that opportunity is fading. So this is where we stand. We've awarded $25,729 in grants at this point. One of those grants is supposed to be reimbursed because it's apparent that it's not going to happen, and that's number 17, Circus Kirkus, and I've been working with Richard Renner on that. So that's the current circumstance, and just to make sure everybody's clear, with TGT funding, it's a unique circumstance because we're budgeting on anticipated revenue. So in other words, the TGT fund doesn't have funds in it. Those funds come in throughout the course of the year through the TGT program. So, and I'm sure Michael could actually speak to this as well. But basically, Michael and Explore Lawrence have taken a big cut in their budget because of the reduced revenues from the hotel industry. So that's just something to be aware of, is we don't have existing funds that we're budgeting against. We're budgeting against anticipated revenues. I hope that makes sense to everybody. Any questions at this point? So the other thing I wanted to bring up is just a reminder is this is the TGT Advisory Board or the Transient Guest Tax Program webpage from last year. And this includes the goals of the program, the process, the timeline from last year, and the grant application. And if you go to the bottom, it actually includes the grant guidelines. So that's something for, just to hold in our awareness is, do we want to make any adjustments to the grant guidelines as we move forward? So we can go through those and see if they all, align with where we are. And I think, Michael will provide some insights too from his experience from the Explore Lawrence side of things, so he can give more information. I'm really just sort of giving you a quick overview of all the resources we have and things to consider. My sense is, and I have to touch base, honestly, it's been a crazy week, so I didn't do as much homework as I had hoped to do, but I will have to touch base with our finance people to find out certain things as we go along. One of those being, if we award somebody funds, but then because TGT revenues are too low, how do we decide, do we do that by percentages? How will we work that out to say, we awarded you X amount of dollars, but we're only going to pay you this amount of dollars based on the funds that we've received. So I've got to work out some of that. Those are some of the questions that I have for our finance department as well. So that's that. And then the other thing I wanted to share, I'm sorry, I can't see was that we do have on iCompass, this is our board page with the grant guidelines from last year, the resolution that establishes the board, the ethics policy and the advisory board policy, just FYI, and then it lists our current membership here. And I sent you a document a few minutes ago. Basically, just to get everybody reminded, at this point, Heidi is a hotelier. Stephen is actually filling a community slot since he retired. Sue Shea is in the arts and culture industry. And then Heather is a hotelier. Derek represents Explore Lawrence. Tim is the other community at-large member. And then Mary Doveton is actually taken over for Mike Maude as the liaison for the Lawrence Cultural Arts Commission. So that's how we are at this point. And all of these people, Tim, Derek, and Heather are all, their terms go through the end of next year. So just getting everybody caught up on this is the board status at this point is 2. Okay? Any questions? I think at this point, if everybody's agreeable, this would be a good opportunity to let Michael speak and share some insights that he's been obviously in the midst of all of these different activities and hotel challenges, so he can give some insight. So Michael, if you're ready.
Thank you, Porter. Just want to kind of bring you up to speed on the overall transient guest tax fund. So it funds obviously Explore Lawrence, and for this year, our funding was cut in half, as Porter's already indicated, and that basically was based on the amount of revenue coming in. So in addition to funding our organization, it funds the Transient Guest Tax Grant Program, funds some debt service, funds some other organizations through this fund. And as we look to next year and the new way that the city is going to be looking at budgets, every quarter they're going to be reviewing revenue. So my concern about the Transient Guest Tax Grant Program is that, and Porter, please step in if I'm wrong, is that once the grants are approved, normally at the last city commission meeting of the year, organizations can then apply for the funds, and then the funds are distributed. I think a change that I would suggest you look at for next year for the grant program, which I think is going to be funded at this point at $120,000 if the revenue comes in, is that the grant should be issued much closer to the event, so we have a better sense if the revenue is coming in that's going to allow us to cover the expenses of the grantees. So that's my only suggestion on it, because again, I think basically people could apply for money as soon as January after they've been approved. So I think that would be something I would suggest you take a look at, the funding closer to the event to make sure that we have the revenue to actually be able to support it. So that's the only thing I have to share. And again, I do appreciate the work you guys have done, and I know how hard this is, but from a funding source, I think we need to look at if the funds are available, we'll support this program, but if the funds aren't available, we need to make the appropriate adjustments. So thank you, Porter, and that's my public comment.
Thank you. And can you stay? Because we may have a further questions. Okay, so he can stay on. So actually, to what Michael spoke to, that happened organically this year because the year got very busy early on. So I was fulfilling the grants chronologically as they came in, trying to make sure that people had their funds for marketing and stuff before their event, but I wasn't able to get to everybody. So we did not award all the money up front. I have the contracts, but we were holding everything as I talked to people, and we all were trying to figure out what was going on and what people could or couldn't do based on governor's orders and local health orders and all that. So I think what Michael suggests is doable and probably makes sense in these circumstances. So the other thing I realized I didn't point out was, hang on, let me make sure I get to the right. Here we go. Let me share my screen again. I'm just giving you information at this point. I'm not trying to direct anything, but one thing to consider is that several of these groups, as they painfully canceled their events, asked if the money could be rolled over to next year, and the answer to that is no. We don't, and this year even more so, we just don't have the funds, so nothing is there to roll over. But that is an awareness to keep in mind that these people were awarded a grant for this year but did not receive that grant. And so to consider that as part of the process of reviewing things for the future as well. So I think this gives us what we need to know at this point. And I don't believe we're going to take any specific actions today, but really getting everybody up to speed and just to garner some of your thoughts moving forward. If we thought we still could be on schedule from last year. Basically, that was October 4th through November 4th for the application period, and then going through various meetings and then the presentations. It just occurred to me that we probably can't do in-person presentations, but we can certainly do Zoom, which will actually be easier for everybody, which is probably a good thing. So we can be a little more efficient in that. But I don't think that we're locked to this schedule. I believe that it would be okay if we went into next year to maybe make final decisions. We would want approval as soon as we could for those early events, but we have some wiggle room in that sense. So at this point, I'm open for thoughts and insights and where you guys are and your thinking as to how to proceed.
Porter, this is Mary Doveton. I've got a couple questions. So if a grant is awarded and for 2021 and the event is in February, when would the money for that event be awarded? And is there an advantage for people who are having events earlier in the year as opposed to later in the year?
That's a really good question and multifaceted. I interrupted you, sorry.
No, I think you understand. You know, if we don't know how much money we're dealing with, how can we be fair to the people whom we are granting it to?
Right. I don't. Go ahead, sorry.
No, go on.
Sorry, I can't see you because I'm sharing my screen. Let me stop sharing my screen. So let me fumble through a good answer here. First and foremost, I think we have to consider we don't know what next year or the next few months looks like. So there's a great challenge in people planning events for January, February, March, April, May, as to whether or not they'll be able to do their event unless they figure out a virtual option and can be more assured. So that's the first thought, is that I would say there is an advantage to events that would occur later in the year. because hopefully by then we'll be further along in this whole pandemic and maybe have a vaccine. I don't know. So there's a whole big question of the pandemic right there. As far as funding, based on what I just said earlier about finance, I need to check in with finance. Michael can chime in on this too. Right now, as we're tracking the TGT revenues, we have a pretty good sense of what percentages they're hitting. So it is conceivable that in the agreement with any group, we could say, you know, up to X percent will be awarded based on transient, excuse me, sorry, hang on. Up to X percent will be awarded to everybody based on anticipated revenues and with adjustments as, you know, needed. To that effect, I don't have a direct answer, and that's something I will have to work out. But I think that would be one thing, is that if Joe's Circus receives $3,000, we would have to put a caveat saying you may not receive $3,000. And that obviously, as you well know, would be a challenge for an event person to say we have to make an adjustable budget. Does that help?
Partially. So let me take this a little bit further. So will we wait until the end of 2021 then to issue any checks? Or would checks be issued as the events occur? And if they're issued as the events occur, what happens if we run out of money?
So what happened this year, which I would suspect would be similar next year, is that what I did was I worked with each of the event coordinators, and we stayed in touch as soon as we knew that there was a risk that their event might be canceled. We stayed in touch. We figured out what's your sort of drop dead date that you would need these funds to administer your marketing efforts. And so we established a date when they would need the funds by. And then I kept checking in with them. And what could happen at that point is once we decide, okay, they're going to be able to do this and they need the funds, I can put that agreement through the city's financial system and get a check cut. So I think it would look something like that. I can't guarantee exactly what it would look like, but I think, like Michael suggested, we can do it on a chronological basis per event. So people would have their money either up front or shortly after they need the money, so they know it's coming. Does that make sense?
It certainly does. I'm taking it more from an event person. So I can see how that works very nicely if your event's in February, March, whatever, and it goes through and you do it and you can apply for your money. But if the event is not until fall, and the transient guest tax funds aren't at expected levels, does the plug then get pulled on events that are taking place in the fall?
And I would say I would work with finance here to make sure that doesn't happen. If we award money, we make sure we're able to give maybe not the full amount based on those revenues, but that we promised X amount of dollars, we need to deliver something because they're planning this for their event. So I don't have a direct answer at this point because I don't know how that exactly works, but I will work with finance to find that out.
Thank you.
So yeah, I hear your concern is if you plan something in December, say, how do you know that you would actually get the funding that you were granted? I understand. The other factor that I haven't talked about, it just occurred to me, is that the City Commission is going to check in throughout the year on the budget. So there may be budget adjustments, and we just don't know what that looks like. But that was part of the agreement with the passing of the budget, was that there was going to be opportunities to revisit and just check in on the budget since it is such an unusual year and so much unknown information. Tim?
Order, this is Tim Metz. I want to make sure I understood what Michael said. because maybe I took it a different way, but I kind of thought that what he said was that we were going to, break this down quarterly, and if the money isn't there, the money just isn't there, based upon collections. So, kind of going to Mary's question and then taking this just one other step further. I mean, what about that situation where, and I realize this sounds kind of nefarious, but somebody schedules their event, their application to us is that their event is scheduled for February, but really they're thinking the fall, but they're wanting to kind of get placeholder funds knowing that we may run out. And so they apply for February, but then they say, well, we're going to delay this until September. Are we going to, do they then go at risk for not being able to get their funds? You see what I'm saying? I mean, it sounds kind of, but we've already seen some folks over the years try to game the system a little bit. And if I were wanting some money and I wanted to assure that I was going to get some money, I would say, hey, my event's going to be in February. And then at the last minute say, oh gosh, well, COVID's still raging. Let's do it in September. And kind of speaking to Mary, how you kind of be fair through that whole process, and then trying to make sure I realize I'm asking a bunch of questions here, but trying to understand, was Michael saying, do we award everybody up front, and then there's just this understanding that if there's no money, you don't get any? Or are we awarding everybody money based upon a percentage? And so if you are awarded that percentage, you're sure you're going to get that. Well, then how do we do that if we don't have the money? I mean, am I being kind of dense here?
No, it's all fair, and honestly, I can't answer that directly because I don't exactly know how the mechanics would work. Again, my only experience at this point is an organic experience, which is what I described this year was, we have to remember a couple of things. One is that events are very idiosyncratic, so it's really not an apples and oranges situation. Some events required big gatherings of people, other events were structured differently, so you have those factors. And again, we don't know what next year is going to look like. So where we are in the pandemic and all those things will certainly be factors. So, I appreciate what you're saying. I don't know. It's more of it's going to be unfolding as we go. And so that's what happened this year where people held off just because they had to. It wasn't about funds and stuff. And what I've done along the way is just worked with our finance office to make sure we knew we had funds available if indeed that event could occur. Does that make sense? So, but this is a great topic that I need to work on with finance to figure out some methodology to be fair and to be able to be confident that funds will be available whether you hold your event in the spring or in the winter. So let me work on that. That's a good thing to think about. Any other thoughts, questions at this point? So my primary goal today was to get everybody sort of caught up. What I can do is now schedule another meeting where we can talk about what kind of timeline we want to look at and how we want to proceed. If there's any special considerations you want to make about, awardees that received funds this year but couldn't do their event, those kinds of considerations, just allow you some time to process this. And also bring back a more cohesive schedule moving forward as to when things are going to lay out like we're talking now. And traditionally it's our meetings have been worked well on Fridays at about this time. I'm hoping with Zoom that could still be the best option, and I'll do my best to plan out no earlier than a couple weeks from today, and then we'll go from there and establish a clearer schedule moving forward if that works for everybody.
Just so you know, Porter, every other Friday, so not today, but every other Friday, we have our owner meetings at 10:30 until noon. So that would be the only consideration for me, is that I would not be able to do them on every other Friday.
So you're good on even Fridays?
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. So actually, since we're sitting here, does October 2nd look good for everybody?
It does for me.
This is Stephen. It's good for me.
Yeah, this is Sue. That would be fine.
That works for me, and this is Heather.
It's fine with me. This is Mary.
This is Tim. It's good for me too.
Wow, that's great. We will plan on 11 o'clock on October 2nd. That will give you some time to review this information, and if you have any questions or thoughts, we can bring that to the next meeting, and then use that meeting to really say, okay, this is how we're going to move forward.
This is Heather. In the meantime, are you going to get with finance and see maybe what that percentage is? Because that's kind of what I'm interested in, is like, what can we say is the guaranteed percent of your money that you might get in the event that we can't fulfill all of it? Like, I'm curious what that number is.
Yes, I'll make sure I set a meeting with finance and get some more information, and they may have some really good thoughts on how we can do this and be much clearer to everybody. Because, yeah, I'm sympathetic to any event person who's trying to coordinate all this stuff and how painful it would be to say, oops, sorry, we said you have this, but we can't do that. So,
Porter, can I make a comment? This is Michael. Can I make a comment before we end the meeting? I just want to make everybody aware that on October 13th, there is going to be a work session on transient guest tax. We've tried to schedule this a long time ago, and it's finally going to happen. So at that point, the city is going to do a presentation on the uses of transient guest tax, and Explore Lawrence is going to also make some comments. I just want to let you know that that meeting will happen on October 13th. Thank you.
one last piece of business. I spoke with Stephen earlier. As I said, Stephen is based on where we ended last year as the chair of this body. It would be good to establish if that's how things will move forward, or if we need to. So I'd love to just establish the chair position for this year. Sorry to throw that at you at this point.
Porter, this is Stephen. As we discussed earlier, basically, I am willing to move forward through the 2020-21 period as the chair as well.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that's interested in chairing, or? I'm not seeing a lot of hands raising, so Derek and Heidi, if you want to be chair, speak now or forever hold your peace.
I think Stephen would be fine as chair as long as he can't boss me around.
And I'm also very happy with Stephen.
This is Stephen. Thanks, guys. And Derek, I won't boss too much.
Okay, let's take a quick roll and make sure that that's in the record books. Mary, are you agree? So actually, can somebody make a motion and a second?
I motion for Stephen Horton to be chair of the TGT Grant Advisory Board.
That was Heather. Thank you.
Yes. Oh, this is Heather. Sorry.
That's okay. It's
And
Metz, I
Susan,
second.
I second it.
so Heather moves, Susan seconds. I will call roll. Mary Doveton,
That sounds great to me.
Tim Metz,
Approve.
Derek Felch,
Yes.
Heather Shull,
Yes.
Sue Shea,
Yes.
Stephen Horton,
Yes.
Heidi Champagne.
I approve.
It is official. Stephen is the chair for the next grant round. Thank you all very much. I appreciate you doing that. So yeah, that puts us on good footing. We're back on track. And I will send you an invitation to a Zoom meeting for October 2nd at 11 a.m. And I will bring more information back at that point. If there's nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. This is great.
And a second.
This is Stephen. I second it.
And we don't have to do a roll. All in favor, say aye together.
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Great. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. I'll be in touch.
Take care.
You
Thanks,
too.
bye.
Happy weekend.
As well.